Hi guys, my name is Andrew Henderson from Nomad Capitalist, nomadcapitalist.com. I'm here at my home in Asia and wanted to discuss a question that has been asked here on YouTube and that I wanted to give an answer to. Is renouncing US citizenship a scam? We'll get into the details on that and what I mean by that in a minute. Before I do that, if you're not subscribed to our channel, definitely subscribe because I've spoken at great length about my personal experience on this topic. And I think that when it comes to stuff in the realm of global citizenship, experience is important, and learning from folks who've actually done stuff is really important. And so I'm going to mention why that's important in a second. But this is a video for people who are curious about US citizenship renunciation. Maybe you're actively considering it. Maybe you would like to go ahead and do it. It's particularly going to be helpful for folks who are high earners or who have a high net worth, whether that's in cryptocurrencies, capital gains, sale of business, whatever the case may be. If you're in one of those two categories, this is especially important to you because I've been looking around YouTube and looking at people who are talking about renouncing US citizenship, who are saying it's a scam, it's a trap, it's a fraud. These are people who are making videos driving around some town in the United States, making videos trying to tell you about some quick and easy loophole, why you should do things in some weird way. I want to talk about that. There are two types of people, in my opinion, who want to renounce citizenship. And you may be one or the other, you may be a hybrid. The first category of people are those who, you go back many decades, they didn't agree with the Vietnam War, for example, and they wanted to burn their passport and make a statement. Maybe today they don't agree with the wars. Maybe they say, hey, I don't agree with funding the wars. I don't want my tax dollars going to fund the wars. As someone who spent a lot of time living outside of the United States, I sympathize. I've talked about this in my video on the topic, and I'm not trying to judge anybody. I do think it's kind of interesting sometimes when someone who has kind of a normal job, they pay $2,000 or $3,000 a year in tax, complaining how their tax dollars are funding a multi-trillion-dollar war. But I understand why you don't want a penny of your money going towards that. That's one thing. The other kind of person is someone who says, you know what, there's no way for me to legally avoid tax on my income. I don't want to live in the United States. I want to do what every other citizen of every other country in the world can do, is go and live somewhere else, choose to live by their tax rules and be left alone, but I can't do that as an American. Or I have a lot of assets and I'm being restricted from making investments, or my life overseas is difficult because of paperwork. So one is more philosophical, one is more practical / financial. Again, you could be both. I had a lot of the philosophical concerns as well. But my philosophical concerns came from having lived outside of the United States for a long time, which I think was the big difference, is that if you're living in the United States and you're looking for a quick way to avoid paying income tax, you're looking for a quick way to quote-unquote get out of the matrix. This idea that you can somehow not pledge allegiance to the United States, or that you can maintain your citizenship but not your nationality, these are smokescreens. There have been people for decades who have been selling all these little alleged tricks on how you can be smarter than everybody else and not pay US income tax. I can tell you this, you're either a US citizen or you're not. You can make the choice, and I fully respect everyone's ability to make the choice. But here's what I would caution. If you're the kind of person who wants to stay living in the United States, then you're going to play by the US rules. Obviously, people since the beginning of time have avoided the rules by going underground. That's not my style, but that's nothing new. But living in the United States, you're going to pay US tax. People call me, how do I stay living in the United States and not pay tax? Now, if you have a business and you want to internationalize the business, maybe you can save some tax. But the idea that you're going to escape the IRS entirely is simply wrong. If you're a US citizen, you have to deal with the IRS. I'm not saying I agree with the IRS. I'm saying there is no great loophole to where you can invoke some constitutional clause or you can give up your national... This is all silliness. And again, it's done by people who, many of whom I don't think have even been outside of the United States. I mean, you look at some of these guys, I don't know if they've even really traveled. They may not have a passport. They think that if you get a passport, that binds you. But if you don't have a passport, you don't get a driver's license, you don't get into the system, somehow you're okay. That's not true. Now, here's why I'm saying this video is especially important to people who are high earners and who have a high net worth. If you want to run around and you're not a high earner and you don't have a high net worth, that's okay. You certainly have less to lose. It's just a fact. If you're earning a high income or you have a lot of money in the bank, these tricks are particularly gonna cost you a lot of money and cost you a lot of time. It's one thing to try and live in the United States and play the little games, and perhaps you get in trouble. Perhaps none of it works. Perhaps you just waste decades of your life trying to file motions in court saying I shouldn't have to pay tax because I'm a citizen but not a national. That's one thing. But if you buy into this idea as a high earner that you can do some trick to avoid being a U.S. citizen, it's not going to work, and you're going to cost yourself a lot of money. The reason that on the financial side of the scale people renounce U.S. citizenship is because it instantly detaches them from the IRS. They no longer have to report any of their foreign businesses, so they can move their business overseas if they haven't already. Maybe they've started a business while they were overseas. That's no longer subject to U.S. tax. They can earn income subject to only paying where they actually live. So if you live in Dubai, if you live as a perpetual traveler, if you live in any number of ways, you might just pay zero in tax. Whereas in the U.S., especially under the new rules, you might pay a lot of tax. If you are a stock trader, cryptocurrency trader, forex trader, you've never really had an effective way as a U.S. citizen to live overseas even and escape tax. And then I think the bigger issue for me was just the complexity of paperwork and reporting. I lived overseas and just got tired of all the reporting and all the paperwork, and then the philosophical was very important as well. So for those of us who want to do things the right way, who want to play by the rules, and who just want to go and live under a different set of rules, renouncing U.S. citizenship is the only way to do that. There's no snapping of your fingers, there's no waving a magic wand, there's no tricks to get the same result. And I certainly hope that anyone who's making $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million a year wouldn't think that there's some cute trick that they can pull to simply not have to pay their U.S. income tax under that arrangement. Obviously, in working with high earners and high net worth people, I see that really the higher you go on the net worth scale, the more reasonable people are in kind of understanding this. What I do see is people who are making that first $250,000 who are saying, what kind of trick can I use? This isn't it. It may not be worth it for you at $250,000 if your motives are purely financial to want to go through the renunciation process. But if it is a purely financial decision, then you really have to do it. And so my main takeaway here is to be cautious of guys who have not actually done the process, have not actually gotten the results. I know that there are guys out there who claim they renounced citizenship even though they've done it through informal channels, i.e. they haven't done it. And they just simply don't pay U.S. income tax. Well, that's great. It may work for a while until you're caught. And then you're going to be in a situation. Maybe you go to jail. Maybe you have a big fine or a penalty or who knows what happens, right? And so I think that it's really careful to avoid being associated with any of that element. I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for this. I'm sure I'm going to have some negative comments. I'm sure we'll get some of the nasty emails that come with saying this kind of stuff. I'm trying to give the best advice. And this is not tax advice. This is not legal advice. I'm just trying to say, here's my opinion. But to people who are operating at a high level, who want to stay legal, who don't want to knock on the door 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, who want to make sure whatever they do, it's just going to be a solid plan, I'm saying avoid anyone who is using any of these tricks, who claims they did something but they did it through some kind of alternate channel, who's basically on the run from the law. That's not what we want to be associated with. Nomad capitalist, and what I do is all about saying, you know what? These are the rules. I'm going to follow the rules, but if I can go over and play by these rules over here because those serve me better, that's great. And I can tell you personally that, actually having a legitimate detachment from the United States, I feel a sense of relief because it never felt like my place. I have actually a greater respect for the country now, and I don't agree with everything they do by all means, but I feel like a much more reasonable approach in my own life now. And I don't feel like I would have had that had I done one of these crackpot schemes that use some weird logic that honestly doesn't even make sense. I listened to it having some knowledge of this, and it's just silliness. And it should be silliness to anyone who's on the ball. But the takeaway is don't be involved with that. If you want to learn more about second passports, going overseas, all of that, definitely subscribe here to our YouTube channel. By the way, somebody said, oh, if you renounce your U.S. citizenship, they'll deem you as stateless. Some of the claims these people make are just, I mean, they're utterly ridiculous and so not grounded in any actual knowledge. Obviously, one of the big things that I do and that I help people do is figure out what's the best second passport or passports for them. And just because you get a second passport doesn't mean you can't be a U.S. citizen anymore. Some people just want to have more options. But this idea that somehow you're going to be stateless if you want to renounce citizenship is also silly. So it's important to make sure that everyone that you follow has basis in facts and in law, because that's actually what's going to apply to you, unless you want to spend your next 40 years getting court cases tossed out, arguing that you're kind of a U.S. citizen but kind of not. So definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to find out more, if you want to figure out what your strategy should be. We've got tons of resources on our website. That website is nomadcapitalist.com, and I highly suggest you check it out.